Welcome to the Art of Marketing Operations, a Taylor podcast. I'm Glenn Bottomley, and today my guest is Alan Iov, Chief Executive Officer at Brands 10X, a retail training organization that helps business entrepreneurs learn how to sell their products on Walmart, Home Depot, Target, Wayfair, Best Buy, and more, both online and in brick and mortar stores, to massively increase their income. Thanks for joining us today, Alan.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
Hey, well, to kick off our conversation first, let's talk about one thing that I know is a passion of yours, and that's crystals. You and I have a similar passion for this, and I know that you have a passion in crystals, the power that they imbue, the energy that they can impart on the human body, the effect that they can have on the frequencies in one's life, etc. So can you just start with just sharing a little bit about where that interest came from?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I thought that was so cool when we talked that you had that same interest. Yeah, it started when I was a kid. So, when I was young, for some reason or another, I had a fascination with crystals. And I would walk around my neighborhood with a hammer and, break open all the rocks in the area, try to find like these little crystals or another. And kind of stayed with me for a little while and then kind of lost it when I was in high school and college. And it's funny, actually, I was at a music festival when I was 21 years old, and I walked into this crystal shop over there, and there's the most like 20, 30, $50,000 crystals, and they were like amazing, and it just rekindled my entire like memory from childhood, and from then onwards all the way, over 10, 15 years later, I have been collecting them pretty extensively, or like heavily. I have a pretty big collection, and yeah, it's definitely one of my biggest hobbies.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, I love it too, and I love the energy side of it, the biological benefit of it. Yeah, I'm a big fan. So thanks for sharing a little bit of that background. Okay, so let's dive into some marketing operations topics now. So interesting story about you. So you are serial entrepreneur. You've already started multiple businesses. You've sold some, you're running several others, and you've spent a ton of time working with, channels like Amazon and Target and Best Buy and like Crate and Barrel and several others to sell the products that you've created and the product innovations that you've had. So can you share what's the sort of the common experience that you've had when working with those types of distribution channels, and how have you had to sort of modify the marketing operations, activities that you do with each of them?
Yeah, sure. So, when you're selling on e-commerce, it's pretty easy. It's not never easy, but it's a little more straightforward when it comes to branding and marketing. You want to do PPC, you want to do correct pricing versus the market price. There's just a whole list of things you can kind of check off. I had to modify quite a bit of things. And one of the things to start with is the pricing of the product. When we first started, our price was too low. We were trying to compete with Amazon pricing. And so we didn't have the exact pricing structure in order to do wholesale pricing. So we had to actually modify that and increase our price. The other thing that we had to do, and that people will have to, this is a good way to start thinking about it before you even get into retail, is, do I have this? Do I have a good price? The other thing is your branding. And there's so much, there that needs to be modified. And it's as simple as having the same product photos for every listing. Like, let's say you have variations on different products, like, are my pictures the same? Is the theme the same? Is the wording the same? Because then, if you're on Target, let's just say .com, and you have different photos, or the wording is different, or some, your certain things look different, and then Amazon looks different, that looks different. It doesn't look good. It kind of forces you to create this like uniform package. Of course, we had to modify our packaging. That's another thing. And I think, we'll go into that into more detail later, but there's definitely something massively important about that, as well as, I think I said pricing for wholesale, but also MAP pricing, which is minimum advertised price, has to be the same for all the platforms. So you kind of have to make sure that you're the same like image, the same brand on across all the channels, and also even in store, because uh, when you're selling for yourself on Amazon or your own website, that's just you. There's no one really telling you like how it should be. But once you get into a relationship with these stores, it's kind of more you're working with someone else on your products, and there's certain things that are expected of you.
Well, and I know that when we chatted before, you had also said that really selling on Amazon and some of these distribution channels, that it's just getting the product there is really just the beginning. And, that then you want to, move into the brick and mortar stores, et cetera. So obviously we're not asking you to give away any of your secret sauce, but if you're talking to a new business owner or someone who's just starting to get into these distribution channels, you talked about price, you talked about brand. Are there other things that that you think a product owner needs to do to kind of get into that and be successful in these distribution channels?
For sure, yeah. We have a huge list of prerequisites, like in our course when we help people, and it goes through like 20 or 30 things, and it's just a thing of check offs. But I can just start shooting some out that I think are important, and you just get into the very base of it. But you definitely need a warehouse. Now, it doesn't have to be your own warehouse, but it has to be a third party warehouse, somewhere where your products are stored and can be shipped out. Now, this is so important. Even like everything that we're doing for retail, that you're doing like a prereq before getting into retail, you should have anyway for your Amazon business or your e-commerce business. Because, for example, something can happen on Amazon where they won't let you store your products with them, as much as you need to. So you should have a warehouse that you can put products in, right? Another thing is certificates. Like you need certain certificates. Now, retail is much more strict on certificates for your product. And we can use a baby product, for example. You can get stuff into the country and you can get stuff on Amazon relatively easily without certificates. But if you want to get into, let's say, Crate and Barrel, or you want to get into Nordstrom's, or whatever it is, they're going to have certain certificates that you need before you can get in, which is a good thing, right? Because that builds consumer trust when you're in Target, for example, and they're like, oh, well, Target is a much more strict platform, so we can feel a little bit more safe that we're seeing those products there. They're probably more, vetted, and so that's another one. Let's see what else. I don't know. I can go off, but I honestly think that those are probably the most important when I think of certain things. Like, make sure that you have certificates, make sure that you have a warehouse, make sure that your packaging is correct, which is, again, we can go a little bit more into that, but well, if you want to.
Yeah. But one of the things that I think is interesting when we chatted before, so one of your current companies, so Brands 10X, so you obviously are helping entrepreneurs turn products into, these powerful brands and these brands that tell a story. And so in some of the things that you've talked about, pricing, brand, warehousing, certificates, et cetera, these are some of the ways to be successful in some of those aspects. But what do you think that marketing operations executives are, what should they be doing today? From a branding perspective, like in terms of, turning products into these brands, these powerful brands. What do you think marketing operations executives should be doing today, but they're not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we really need to start thinking long term with our products. And when I say Amazon is just the beginning, I'd love to share a quick story of what I mean by that.
Yeah, please do.
When I first started, and I was doing so well on Amazon, I felt so good. We had $1 million+ company in product sales, and I was looking for more. I was like, okay, Amazon is just beginning. We had previously gotten suspended for some stupid reason, on Amazon, and it made me think like we need more diversification, we need safety. Which made me go find a mentor. And eventually, after a long search, I did find a mentor who had $100 million company in the past. This was about 20 years ago. So, it would be close to, I don't know, 500 million or more nowadays company. And when I went over my company with him, thinking I was so like cool, he was not impressed at all. He said, Alan, you have a product. You don't have a brand. You have a product. You're selling in a marketplace that you don't own. You don't own the customers. You don't own this. You don't own that, right? You're not a company. You're literally a product. And so when we think about the question that you said, how can people prepare, right? When we think about Amazon, we think about e-commerce as potentially just the beginning. You start to think like, what is there more that I can be doing now to prepare for the future? And that, again, has to go with what I was saying, is like making sure you have a brand. And how do we do that? We start building consistency through all the listings. We start making sure our pricing is correct for wholesale in the future. Now, I'm sure a lot of you listening would know that it can be hard to raise your prices, right? But you want to make sure you have the right price for wholesale in the future now, so that when you do come into the market, and you realize, wow, my product is too cheap, I wouldn't even be able to price it correctly to get into stores. Then you're already disqualified. And that happened to us, actually. We did have to change our prices, which it's doable. When we did change our price, we were, for example, $17.99. Wholesale price, by the way, is usually around 50%. So you take whatever your product is, let's say it's $20. Retailers are going to want $10 for that. So you want to calculate your profits from there. We had to move our price from $17.99 to $21.99 in order for it to work. Now, oddly enough, our sales increased after we did that on Amazon. So sometimes raising the price, so don't be scared if you're like, oh, I have to raise my price, it's not enough. No way, I'm not getting into retail, I'm not even trying. There's odd reasons sometimes that a higher price point will lead to more sales, as a weird side note.
Yeah.
But product packaging is another one. So, you want to make sure, like if you order, I don't know, 20,000 units of a cardboard box, and then you decide you want to get into retail, then, well, you can sell through that, but that can take time. You want to start thinking about like that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You want to start thinking about the certificates and that can save you too, because if you don't do the proper research on certificates for your products, like customs does random checks, and you may not get one now, you might get one a year from now, but if you don't have that certificate, you could have trouble in the future.
Sure.
So what everyone, I think, should be doing to prepare is starting to think like, if I was a $10 million, $20, $100 million company, right, and I was selling to big box stores and I was on TV or whatever, like I am a huge company. Let's work backwards and think like, what do they have, right? Do they have a 1-800 number? Do they have people who are answering, customer service emails? Do they have, proper branding, proper, like
The
marketing,
marketing.
yeah.
Yep. Logos and so forth.
All these kind of things. Mm-hmm.
Well, and what's interesting about and I think in your background, and certainly I think that there are, inventors and entrepreneurs, out there who are like you, that they create and they start with a product. And so I know that, like, for example, one of the companies that you owned and that you ended up selling was called Snap and Sold. And then after you sold that company, I know that you went to Moscow for a little while, and that now part of your time is really, generating, creating, innovating brand new products, like literally from the ground up, both from the ideation stage through the, creation, marketing, production, and then, obviously, then ultimately building a brand. And so what's been sort of the key that going out there and wanting to create a new product from scratch and bring it all the way through, has there been sort of a common thread for you that, like, because you've had a lot of hits, in terms of the products that you've created and invented.
Right.
So is there something that, like, I'm always making sure that there's a gap in the market, or I want to make sure that this product doesn't exist, or I want to make sure that I'm taking an existing product and making it better, or like, what's that common thread for you to identify, like, that's going to be a hit product?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I know like a lot of people who are very successful on Amazon, they have a killer product research phase, right?
Hmm.
Where you're doing keyword analysis, you're doing how many of these products are selling this. And I'm not that far away from that either. The difference now is I look at it in the whole market, not just on Amazon. So when we're looking at new products, when we first started, it was just that. What is selling that has a lot of search volume, right? But there might be a gap in that market, or what product is doing really well, but needs to be improved. So let's just say, and I'll give you one of our most successful products. It was a nightlight, kids nightlight, animal shaped. And there was one selling in the market like 6 years ago. It was a cat, just a very basic cat. You tap it, it changes colors. And we saw this and we saw that it was selling like crazy. And there wasn't anyone else doing that. So we thought, there's an opportunity. You can make different animal shapes. You can improve it by, there's like wires sticking out on the bottom when you like the module is just so old school. And we ordered a sample and we just made it way better, and it was a massive instant hit. So finding products that can be improved on that have good sales. And I feel like that's getting harder to do nowadays, right? Because everyone is doing that. Everyone is so saturated on Amazon. So there's a new way that we're doing things now. And this is, I think, one of the coolest things about being in retail and other platforms. If you go to Amazon.com and you type in kids nightlight, for example, you're going to get a tons of products, tens of thousands of reviews. You can keep scrolling. If you go to Target.com and you type in kids nightlight, you're not going to see very much stuff there. Actually, what's funny, you're going to see some bigger brands potentially, and you might be 5 years behind on the innovation on Target and on Best Buy. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, Home Depot. So what's cool now is Amazon sellers are so far ahead of the curve on other retail platforms on the new innovation products, because everyone's competing so hard to get the best product. And most of these people are just on Amazon.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that we do, and that makes it so cool and actually simple in a way, is just find products that are doing really well on Amazon, going to Target, searching for anything even close to that. And if there's nothing, then you just launch that product. You can, of course, make your own innovations. You can always step it up one. But then if you're already in, let's say you're working with Target, then you just present it to them and you're in, and you have no competition almost.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it just depends on where you are and who you're working with. Um, that'll base the products that you release.
Yeah. And when the nightlight that you mentioned, was that the children's nightlight? Was that when you were running the company Lumi World?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when you owned that company Lumi World, and childhood toys, etc. Because I remember we talked a little bit about this when we met before, and I know that the work that you were doing on physical marketing impressions, things like the actual packaging around the toy or around the nightlight, etc. That was obviously a really, really key part, but it was the primary. The physical packaging of the product was the primary physical marketing impression you were focused on. So, is there any advice that you would give again to an innovator, someone who's wanting to create something, a product creator, as it relates to the packaging? Now, we talked earlier about the consistency of packaging, the consistency of the brand, the logo, and so forth. But is there anything else on the packaging side that you think is a really, really important thing to be successful, either in online or in brick and mortar?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, packaging is so important, and I want people to think of it like this. You have a product listing online, right, that sells your product. But if you're in store, your packaging is your product listing. So some things to think about. It's like, what are the most important prospects and points on your package or on your product that make it a good product? So you need to make sure that that's on there. And another thing is, you have to imagine yourself as a customer walking through and looking at the package, and like, what do you want to see? And a lot of times, I'll give you a specific example, is the same nightlight. So it's a kid's nightlight, it's a little tapping silicone cute animal. When we first started, we had it as a cardboard box. So it's a fully cardboard box. You have the picture of the product on the box. And then you have in little words, it was like a full description. It wasn't an important part of our thought process. So after a lot of work, and after actually going to a lot of different stores and seeing what similar products might have had, we completely changed the packaging. So what we did was, it was no longer fully cardboard, it was actually clear plastic. So you could actually see the product. On the back of the packaging was the lifestyle photos of it in use, right? So people can see what it looks like when people are using your product. And then we had a little hole cut into it where people could put their finger through it and touch the soft silicone material, so you can test and see that it is soft. Like, these are the kind of things that you want to see. And why I think actually it's so important to have good packaging, even on Amazon, or your, let's just say, Shopify website, is because when people receive your product and they see your packaging, it creates an impression in their mind of the quality of the brand, right? So when we're thinking a good brand, you imagine an Apple product, or there's all these big names, and you open it and it's the laptop is soft velvet like thing. What is it? The cover cloth, the
Yep.
package is all sleek,
Yep.
like that creates, if you want a repeat
Some
customer.
experience. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so it's so important to do that. And when you do that, you can actually increase the price of your product, because the way that I wanted to do it when I create any company that I do, I don't want generic, I don't want cheap. I want quality in every step of the way and step of the product, because that's what creates a brand, and
Yeah.
that's what creates the image.
Well, and I've always sort of viewed that as customer touch points, and maximizing the customer touch point everywhere. So the product, to your point, that is definitely a touch point because they're using the product. But the packaging is something that the customer is touching as well. They're visually experiencing it. They're physically touching it. To your point, they're touching the silicone on the product. So the packaging enables yet another touch point. The shipping box, the container, an email confirmation. All of these things are customer touch points along the way. So doing that analysis to understand the buyer journey, and where along that buyer journey are those touch points. Everything from a digital ad, an SEM ad, a landing page, that the buyer goes to because they land there and, oh, that's really interesting. Oh, I'm going to go buy this on Amazon or whatever. Every single step of the way, those are customer touch points. So what I'm hearing from you is, you want to make sure, and you get more margin and you can secure higher prices if that whole experience and all of those touch points are as polished as they can be. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that even ties into not just packaging, right? That also ties into certifications too. Like, look how certified our product is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
materials, like everything you can do to brand yourself. That's the whole thing, right? Like, having a brand that's recognized and known for quality, even if you're not like that much more quality than your competitors, but you're perceived to be, and you do these little things that make it seem like it, your return is going to be way higher than what you would spend to get that image out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then have you found that, obviously from a business perspective, There's all sorts of exciting things that happen, but there's also some things that, not that great. Have there been some experiences that you can sort of point to that make the e-commerce business model? There's some disadvantages to selling on, e-com.
Sure. Well, I mean, I love ecom. I think that ecom and retail should be done side by side. But if you're just doing ecom, then you're really limiting yourself because, you know, I don't know the exact numbers nowadays, but just last year it was like 80% of all sales are retail. So a huge disadvantage is you're just not getting in front of many eyes. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, like, you'll have a lot of people. So when we started going in the stores, we got way more sales online because people will go to stores, but then they'll go and buy it online, right? So you're not putting yourself in front of as many eyes as you would if you were just on e-commerce. The other thing is that once you do get into stores, you actually don't have to spend that much on advertising unless you want to. When we were in a lot of stores, we spent almost nothing on ads, and so it was actually a lot cheaper to just be in stores than having to fight with everyone else for that, Facebook ad or that PPC campaign. Um, that's another huge disadvantage. And another one is competitors. So like when you're just on e-commerce, you kind of get lost in the sea of competitors all fighting for the space, whereas there's the brands that are more recognized that are really actually getting most of the sales.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One more thing, and this relates to selling on, let's just say Amazon, which I think a lot of people are doing, is that when you sell just on Amazon, you're completely at their whim. So what does that mean? It means that if for one reason or another they feel like you need to be shut down or you're suspended because who knows, like black hatters could be trying to take you down. Amazon could, I mean, I was suspended so many times for reasons that I thought was insane. Even on Shopify, we had once we're taken down for a mistake on their end. So you're kind of limiting yourself to the mercy of the platforms that you sell in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you talk about the platforms, Amazon, Spotify, et cetera, or Shopify, excuse me. And but are there metrics that you feel are the most important? That these are the top three metrics that are the most important for our business, for this product, for this brand. And conversely, are there some things that, as you're on these distribution channels and these platforms, that there's vanity metrics that they look up, but it doesn't really matter. So what's your view of, like, what's those top three that are really key for you, and what should people basically ignore?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's profits, right? Profits, 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 EBITDA and profits. So like you could be selling 1 million products a month, but if you're not making any profits, then what's the point? Now there's exceptions to that, right? If you're doing a marketing campaign and you're trying to boost yourself up to be visibly seen more, you want to get to the top of keyword searches, you want to get ads out there, sure. But like the biggest point is, are you making money? Right? At the end of a sale, like how much profit, at the very end of everything, how much profit is left? And I think so many people get caught up in high sales like numbers. Oh yeah, we made 10 million. Well, you didn't make 10 million, you sold 10 million, but what did you actually like pocket? Right? That's a huge one. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the metric that I was always overlooked is your visibility too. So like if you're just on one platform, you're not, like, that's a metric. Like where are we being seen, right? Where are we? What's our
Mm-hmm.
diversification?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're thinking money, we're talking money in business. We're also talking money like stocks. Like, are you going to put all your money in Amazon? I mean, you would have done really well if you did, let's just say, but still, like, you want to be safe and you want to be diversified. And I think that's a metric that people should look at. Like, what's our safety metric, Um, I think those two are super important, and you can get into detail for all different kinds of metrics. But when we're talking retail and we're talking it's those two. You need to make money and you need to grow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I can definitely agree with that. I think that's very, very strong. And then when you think about your current firm, Brands 10X, and you're working with your clients and they're trying to move from e-commerce and now they want to go to brick and mortar, or conversely, they're in brick and mortar now and they want to go online. How do you help them sort of operationalize that transition?
Yeah. So one thing, if you're doing really well online, like it's highly recommended to move into retail, because the thing is, the retailers, they look at your online presence. And if they see you're doing really well on Amazon, let's just say, and you have a ton of reviews, it makes it 10 times easier. So anyone who's doing well online, all I say to do is to get retail ready, which is, there's a list of the 20 things that you need to do, have a proper website, certificates, warehouse, pricing, get all that kind of stuff. There's a few media things you need to do. Once that's done, then it's just literally reaching out to the wholesalers or the big box stores and saying, there's a script that you can even copy and paste and say, this is our brand, this is our product, this is how well we do. And it's that simple. I mean, obviously you need to learn some things. You might need to hire some people.
Sure.
So there's definitely a process of growing the company, which I think everybody really wants to do as long as they're profitable.
Yep.
You're going to grow and you need to become a CEO. It's like, it's changing, right? From a business owner who might be selling things online, even if you're doing well, to becoming a full-on like CEO. It's that journey, right? Where you're managing maybe 100 people and you have a huge business and you have different divisions. Like, I think that's the goal that a lot of people want, at least those who with ambition. It's like, we want to rise to the top. We want our brands to do really well. So that's a whole operational like process and a training process for yourself and your own growth. As a person.
Well, and I really was taken by your comment earlier when we were talking about product packaging, and what a mindset shift that your online listing, on Amazon, on Best Buy, on Target, that your products, that you have a listing there. But once you move into that retail environment, the physical brick and mortar store, your packaging becomes your listing. Because there is no computer, it is physically on the shelf. The packaging is all you have to help to convince that buyer to pick it up. So I love that. That was a really key thing. And so to your point, that's an interesting mindset shift. If you're going e-com to brick and mortar, to e-com, either way, it's like, hey, remember that about the product as well. So I think that's excellent. So before we wrap up today's episode, Alan, what is in your opinion, the main takeaway that you want to share on how to understand and address the challenges facing marketing operations executives today?
Yeah, I think the main point, and I've been talking about this, I think the main point is to think big and think big, but don't just think vertically, think horizontally too. We want to grow our numbers, but we also want to grow, in diversification and where we're growing. And when you think about marketing, you don't want to just think about, PPC and ad spend. You want to think about marketing in other platforms, like growing in there. And I just don't want people to ignore that, because I know so many people are all about e-commerce. I know that's the thing, right? That's the trend. But like, for me, why I became successful is because everyone said like, screw retail, whatever, it's all about e-commerce. And I was like, well, I love stocks, so I'm an avid investor. So when stocks are going down and everyone's like, it's dead, whatever, I'm like, actually, maybe I should go towards that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I did. And that's why it worked out. So if not a lot of people are doing it, that just means that it's potentially easier for you to do.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you so much, Alan. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It was great.
All right. Well, this wraps up this episode of The Art of Marketing Operations. Until next time, stay safe and take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to The Art of Marketing Operations, brought to you by Taylor. Don't forget to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and share. Until next time.